There is a quiet difference you start to notice once you pay attention long enough. A difference not spoken out loud but visible in faces, posture, tone, and energy. It shows up in how men walk into rooms, how they sit in silence, how they laugh, and how they don't. Some men smile easily, not loudly, not desperately, but with a calm certainty that feels earned. Other men smile too, but their smile arrives a second too late, leaves a second too early, and never reaches their eyes. This difference is not about happiness versus misery in the childish sense. It is about alignment versus performance. And when you observe long enough, you begin to see a pattern that modern culture refuses to discuss honestly. Many single men smile because their lives are coherent. Many married men pretend because their lives are negotiated. A man's smile is not just an expression, it is a signal of internal order. When a man's thoughts, actions, and values move in the same direction, his nervous system relaxes. He does not need to constantly scan for approval, conflict, or correction. His smile is not an announcement, it is a byproduct. Single men who have not surrendered their autonomy often live in this state. They wake up knowing that the consequences of their choices belong to them alone. Their time is theirs. Their money is theirs. Their silence is theirs. Even their mistakes are theirs. This ownership creates a strange and powerful peace. It does not mean loneliness does not exist, but loneliness is honest. It does not require pretending. Married men, on the other hand, often live inside a performance structure they did not fully understand when they entered it. Modern marriage is rarely framed as a trade-off of autonomy for stability. It is sold as an upgrade, a final level, a proof of maturity. Men are told that commitment equals purpose and that sacrifice equals virtue. What they are not told is that many sacrifices are not temporary but permanent, and many compromises are not mutual but expected. Over time, the gap between who a man is and who he must be grows wider. When that gap becomes too large, the smile turns into a mask. Pretending does not begin with misery. It begins with small adjustments, laughing at things that are not funny to keep the peace, agreeing to plans that drain energy to avoid conflict, apologizing not because you are wrong but because resistance is expensive. Each adjustment seems minor in isolation. Together they create a life where the man is present physically but absent internally. His smile becomes a social tool, not an emotional truth. It is used to signal that everything is fine when everything is merely managed. Single men who smile are not smiling because they are free from struggle. They smile because their struggles make sense to them. When a single man works late, it is usually because he chose to. When he fails, he knows exactly why. When he succeeds, there is no negotiation about who deserves credit. This clarity sharpens a man. It gives his suffering meaning and his joy depth. He is not constantly asking himself whether his efforts will be misunderstood, minimized, or redirected. The smile that emerges from this clarity is grounded, not performative. Married men often operate under constant emotional taxation. This does not mean every marriage is a prison or every wife is an antagonist. It means that modern relational dynamics place men under unspoken expectations that are rarely reciprocated with the same intensity. Men are expected to be emotionally available but not emotionally needy, strong but not stubborn, ambitious but not obsessed, calm but not detached, assertive but not threatening. Each expectation pulls the man in a different direction. The result is emotional fragmentation. A fragmented man can smile, but he cannot rest inside that smile. There is also the matter of respect, the quiet currency of male well-being. Men do not need constant praise, but they need to feel that their presence matters, that their judgment carries weight, and that their boundaries are acknowledged. Many single men retain their self-respect because they have not outsourced it. Their standards are self-defined. Married men often unknowingly outsource their sense of worth to relational validation. When respect becomes conditional on compliance, the man learns to perform rather than to stand. Performance demands energy. Over time, energy depletion leads to emotional numbness. A numb man can mimic happiness, but he cannot experience it fully. Society plays a significant role in reinforcing this dynamic. Single men are often pitied publicly but envied privately. Married men are celebrated publicly but often unheard privately. A single man who invests in himself is told he is selfish until he succeeds, at which point he is called disciplined. A married man who sacrifices himself is called responsible until he burns out, at which point he is told to communicate better. This contradiction teaches men to hide their truth behind socially acceptable expressions. Smiling becomes safer than speaking. Another factor is time perception. Single men experience time as expandable. They can compress it, stretch it, waste it, or invest it. This sense of control reduces anxiety. Married men often experience time as allocated. Hours are divided, weekends are negotiated, rest must be justified. When time is no longer yours, spontaneity dies quietly, and with it joy. The smile that comes from spontaneity is impossible to fake. The smile that comes from obligation is stiff and rehearsed. The single man's smile is often rooted in self-trust. He knows that if something goes wrong, he will handle it. There is no committee meeting inside his head before making a decision. Married men frequently lose this immediacy. Decisions must pass through filters, reactions must be predicted, outcomes must be managed. Over time, this erodes confidence. A man who no longer trusts his instincts learns to doubt even his happiness. He smiles because it is expected, not because it is felt. There is also a psychological phenomenon at play called emotional dissonance. When a man's internal reality does not match his external presentation, tension builds. Single men experience less of this because their external life reflects their internal priorities more closely. Married men often experience high levels of dissonance because they are expected to project contentment regardless of internal conflict. Maintaining this split requires constant mental effort. Eventually, the mind chooses numbness over exhaustion. The smile remains, but the man behind it fades. This is not a condemnation of marriage itself, but of the unexamined way it is often entered. Many men marry under social pressure, fear of loneliness, or the belief that marriage will solve internal uncertainty. When those uncertainties remain, now amplified by responsibility, disappointment sets in. Single men who smile often delayed commitment until they understood themselves. Their smile carries the weight of self-knowledge. Married men who pretend often skip that step and now pay the price in quiet dissatisfaction. Another uncomfortable truth is that many men are not allowed to evolve once married. Growth that disrupts relational balance is often resisted. A man who becomes stronger, more focused, or more independent may be subtly discouraged if that growth threatens established dynamics. Over time, the man learns to cap his potential to maintain harmony. Nothing kills genuine joy faster than self-censorship. The smile becomes a compromise, a way of saying I am still here without saying I am still me. Single men also benefit from solitude in a way society underestimates. Solitude is not isolation. It is a psychological reset. It allows a man to hear his own thoughts without interference. This internal dialogue builds coherence. Married men rarely experience true solitude. Even when alone, they are mentally tethered to relational concerns. Without solitude, emotional processing stalls. Unprocessed emotion hardens into quiet resentment. Resentment does not always show as anger. Often it shows as forced cheerfulness. There is a reason why so many married men appear happy in public and drained in private. Public spaces reward the performance of success. A smiling wife, well-dressed children, social approval. But private spaces demand authenticity. When a man cannot be authentic at home, his smile becomes a uniform he puts on when leaving the house and takes off when returning. Over time, he forgets what his real face feels like. Single men who smile are often misunderstood as carefree or immature. In reality, many of them have simply chosen coherence over conformity. They have accepted the cost of solitude in exchange for psychological stability. Their smile is not loud because it does not need to convince anyone. It is quiet because it is settled. Married men who pretend are often deeply responsible individuals trapped between duty and identity. Their smile is loud because it must reassure others. It is fragile because it is borrowed. There is also the issue of male communication. Men bond through shared purpose more than shared emotion. Single men often maintain strong purpose alignment because their goals are self-directed. Married men frequently find their purpose diluted by competing priorities. When a man's purpose becomes secondary to maintaining peace, his motivation weakens. Motivation loss leads to existential fatigue. Fatigue dulls joy. The smile remains as a placeholder. Many married men will say they are happy and genuinely believe it because admitting otherwise feels like betrayal. They are not lying to others as much as they are lying to themselves. This self-deception is protective but costly. It keeps the system stable while the individual erodes. Single men, with fewer systems to protect, are forced to confront their dissatisfaction directly. Confrontation leads to adjustment. Adjustment leads to growth. Growth leads to genuine smiles. There is a subtle power dynamic shift that often occurs after marriage that men are not prepared for. A man's leverage decreases while his responsibility increases. When leverage and responsibility move in opposite directions, stress skyrockets. Stress managed without expression turns inward. Inward stress manifests as emotional flatness. Flatness is easily mistaken for contentment from the outside. The smile becomes the final layer of camouflage. The modern narrative insists that a good man sacrifices without complaint, but suppressed complaint does not disappear, it mutates. It becomes cynicism, withdrawal, or performative happiness. Single men who smile are not morally superior. They are simply operating in environments that allow emotional honesty. Married men who pretend are often emotionally intelligent enough to know that honesty would destabilize their world, so they choose stability over truth. When you look closely, the difference between the two smiles is timing. The single man's smile appears in stillness, during a walk, a workout, a moment of reflection. The married man's smile appears on cue during social gatherings, photos, conversations. One emerges organically. The other is activated strategically. One replenishes energy. The other consumes it. None of this means marriage is doomed or that singlehood is superior. It means that men are rarely taught to prioritize internal alignment before external commitment. Those who do often smile because their lives make sense to them. Those who do not often pretend because admitting confusion feels too dangerous. The smile, in both cases, tells the truth if you know how to read it. In the end, a man's smile is a diagnostic tool. It reveals whether he is living by choice or by compliance, whether his energy is flowing or leaking, whether his identity is intact or fragmented. Single men who smile are often smiling because they recognize themselves in their lives. Married men who pretend are often smiling because they no longer do. And the most uncomfortable truth of all is that many married men envy the single man's smile, not because they want his life, but because they remember having that smile once themselves.